Together, growing in faith, changing communities.
Good evening, dear friends. Thank you, Father Stephen. Thank you for coming back. And for those who are coming for the first time, thank you. Does God listen to our prayers? Does he listen to them? Does he even answer our prayers? That's the topic for tonight. Does God ever listen? Now, I'd like us to reflect on the first book of Samuel, chapter 1. We'll start from verse 1 till verse 20. First Samuel, from chapter 1, from verse 1 to verse 20. From verse 1 to verse 8, it gives us a background of what is going on. There was a certain man from Ramathaim, Elkanah by name, a Zophite from the hill country of Ephraim. He was the son of Jeroham, son of Elam, Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. He had two wives, one named Hannah, the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah was childless. This man regularly went on pilgrimage from the city to worship the Lord of hosts and to sacrifice to him at Shiloh, where the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were ministering as priests of the Lord. When the day came for Elkanah to offer sacrifice, he used to give a portion each to his wife, Peninnah, and to all her sons and daughters, but a double portion to Hannah, because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. Her rival, to upset her, turned into it and made it a constant reproach that the Lord had left her barren. This went on year after year. Each time they made their pilgrimage to the sanctuary of the Lord, Peninnah will approach her, and Hannah will weep and refuse to eat. Her husband Elkanah used to ask her, Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you refuse to eat? Why do you grieve? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? Let me just stop there a bit. Let's leave verse 1. Verse 1 has all the names and everything. But there's probably one thing that I want to talk about in verse 1, Elkanah. It comes from a combination of two words. El means God. We know that El means God either in Hebrew or it means God in Mesopotamian languages. Just El means God. We know that. Kana is a verb, purchase, to buy. So Elkanah, the one who has been bought by God, which is something absolutely beautiful, because all of us have been bought by the blood of Christ. Remember St. Paul has a beautiful argument in his theological discourse, and he says, we are bought by God, we've been bought by the price, and so we belong to God. Now, if you go deeper into that, Jesus says, I no longer call you slaves, I call you my friends. What did we do with slaves? We branded them, you know, and so that it kept a mark that I belong to the owner, I belong to my master. And all of us are actually branded at baptism. You remember that baptism gives us this, what we call an indelible mark, that we are owned by God, that we belong to God, and He made us for His own good. And so we are His sons and we are His daughters. So baptism does that. So too does the sacrament of confirmation. But Jesus says, even though we have this indelible mark, we are not slaves. He says, I call you friends, for I've made known to you everything that God has revealed to me. So when we talk about Elkanah, we are talking about someone who's special in the eyes of God. And it's important for me to stress that. He's a righteous person. He's a righteous man. Even though he has two wives, he's a righteous man. And we need to accept and understand that at that time, it was quite okay to have two wives. It was quite okay to have more than one wife. one wife. You'll find King David, who has more than 100 wives. Probably Solomon had thousands of them. Obviously, I'm exaggerating with Solomon, but he had quite a number of wives as well. But the point is that he had 2 wives. One was Peninnah. What does the name Peninnah mean? A pearl. Something special. Something of great importance, of great gift, of great treasure. He also had another wife. Her name was Hannah. Peninnah has sons and daughters. Hannah has nothing. And these are rivalries. Peninnah is threatened by Hannah. Why? Because Elkanah loved Hannah more than he loved Peninnah. Is this the only time we hear about this in the scriptures? No. Go back to the story of Isaac. You remember Isaac has 2 wives. He has Rachel and he has Leah. He loves Rachel more than he loves Leah. And Rachel cannot really give him children till later on he gives him Joseph and he gives him Benjamin, the son of my right. So you have the favorite and the one who's disliked. Now what shocks me, and probably it will shock you, Hannah was barren. If you read another translation, it will say the Lord closed her womb. And I hope that shocks you. Why would you close my womb? And you know that I married into this relationship where my rivalry has sons and daughters. Why can't I have something of my own? Why can't I bear my own? Why can't I be fulfilled? And if my husband Elkanah is a righteous man, why can't you give him that which he's asking for? Have you ever prayed to God and God just seems to be so distant? You know, there's this song, knocking on heaven's door. Have you heard that song? Have you ever knocked at the doors and nobody seems to listen? There's another song that God is watching from a distance. And I don't believe in that song. I love it. It's a beautiful song, but I just don't believe in it. I don't believe in a God who watches from a distance. I believe in a God that we spoke about in the first 2 sessions that we had, that who has his hands dirty, that who comes into our own situations, who understands, who knows. You go to the book of Exodus chapter 3, he says, I've heard your cry. I've seen your tears. I know what you're going through. But is that true? Can you identify with that? I always go back to the last couple of months that we had, or the last 2 years that we had, when people went to ICU, when they were put on a ventilator, when prayers were offered throughout the world, and they still died. Does God ever listen? Does he listen to our prayers? Now, I'm always fascinated by the concept that someone was barren. If you were to analyze the word, someone is barren, easily we could say, this person has not given birth. We can easily say that. But I tend to disagree with that argument. I say that's possible, but it's also one of many other definitions. What happened if she had conceived, but had miscarriages? What happened if she had conceived and given birth to a stillborn? How many women have suffered that silently? The fear of not knowing whether I will bring this pregnancy to its full term. The pain of going into the hospital, maternity ward, and not coming back with a baby. The excitement that awaits you at home and the sadness in your heart. And now we live in a culture of the new age and the technology, because they will send you messages, they will presume your child is 6 months, and they will say you must be thinking of doing this and this with your child. They will presume your child is 1 year. So every time you see another baby, it reminds you of a child I should have had, and I did not have. And so how many of our women, of our men, have suffered with not having a child? And so you look at this story of Hannah, but you also see Hannah and her rivalry Peninnah. There's something in the scriptures that we call the spirit of Peninnah. The spirit of Peninnah is to rejoice over someone else's misfortune. I'm excited that you're suffering. I'm happy that things are not falling into place. I'm happy that you're struggling. And that can be a painful thing. Is that found in our human experiences? Possibly, yeah, it could be found. That I'm happy that I'm not suffering as you are. Go back to the gospel that we had the other Sunday of a tax collector and a sinner. One goes up to the temple and he says, Lord, I'm grateful that I'm not like him. I fast, I tithe, I do this and that. They are bad, they are terrible, and I'm better. And sometimes as Catholics we have the same attitude. Sometimes as Catholics we think we are the only church that has salvation. And sometimes as Catholics we think heaven only belongs to us. And we'll be quite surprised when we get to heaven, find Hindus, Tamils, Buddhists, African traditionalists, Muslims, even other Christians. I believe that God is not limited by religion, by creed, by race, by culture, by whatever that seems to separate us here on earth. But the question that we're dealing with in today is, why will I find pleasure in the suffering of someone else? What made Peninnah so comfortable that she will be every year excited that Hannah has no child? Let's move on, dear friends. In verse 9, Hannah rose after one such meal at Shiloh, and she presented herself before the Lord. At that time, Eli, the priest, was sitting on a chair near the doorpost of the Lord's temple. In her bitterness, she prayed to the Lord, weeping, and she made a vow, promising, O Lord of hosts, if you look with pity on my misery, if you remember me and do not forget me, if you give your handmaid a male child, I will give him to the Lord. For as long as he lives, neither wine nor liquor shall he drink, and no razor shall ever touch his head. I feel there's something absolutely powerful in these two verses. The first one, Hannah refuses to sit and to eat. How many of us believe in going to a fast? Just go for a fast, you know, F-A-S-T. Refuse to eat. You know, during Lent we talk about fasting, almsgiving and prayer. And some people, they say, I'm going to give up alcohol, I'm going to give up cigarettes, I'm going to give up sweets, I'm going to give up. That's not the kind of fast I'm talking about, you know, because I always believe that why do you fast something for 46 days and after 46 days then pick it up? You know, it doesn't help. It's just an interesting thing of doing things. But this is someone who says, I refuse to eat until you listen to me. It's a different mindset when you think of it. She says to God, I will not eat until you listen to me. It's like you go on a hunger strike and you say, and you call God into order, and you say, I need you to listen, I need you to talk to me, I need you to sit down and hear what I'm about to say to you. She refuses to sit with her husband. She refuses to sit with her family. She says, I want to go away and I want to pray. I need to talk to you. Can this happen to us in our lives? There are moments where I think the Lord is calling us to go on a solitude, a single journey, where my husband cannot go with me, my wife cannot go with me, my child cannot go with me, My parents cannot go. Even my friends cannot go with me. I need to do this on my own. I need to find peace. I need to find the purpose of my life. I need to listen to what God is asking of me. I need to make peace with the past. I need to do this for myself. And those moments come where the Lord will remove people away from us. He will move them away, or He will force us to remove people from us. Go back to the story of Abraham and Lot. The Lord reveals to Abraham that I want you to leave Ur and I want you to go to the promised land. But Abraham, because he's a generous man, he's a good person, he decides, I'm going to take Lot with me. And as they journey towards the promised land, God stops speaking to Abraham. And eventually there is a fight that happens between the servants or the workers of Abraham and Lot. And Abraham and Lot come and sit down and they say, there is a strife, there's some bit of noise in here, and we shouldn't be living like this. This tension is not good for us. Let's part ways. If you go to the west, I will go to the east. If you go to the east, I will go to the west. And immediately when one takes the other direction, the other one took the other one, and God came back and continued to speak to Abraham. Could it be possible that God does not speak to us because of the company we keep? Let me say that again in English. Could it be possible that God does not speak to us because of the company that we keep? And so sometimes when people want to walk away, let them walk away. Do not beg people to stay. I often say this in the parish. You mustn't say this, okay? When people say, I'm leaving the parish, I'm leaving the parish, I always say to them, make sure you close the door on your way out. And it's quite beautiful, because there are certain people that are good in themselves, but maybe they are not meant to be here with us at this stage, because the parish needs to take a different direction. And this person is not willing. And if this person is not willing, God is not going to wait for you to give an approval for him to do that which he wants to do in his church. And same in our own lives. If God wants to do certain things in your life, and there's someone who stops you from achieving that which God wants you to do, it is quite simple. If they want to go with gratitude, with graciousness, allow them to go. She leaves everything. She leaves her husband, and she goes to the temple of the Lord. And I find that absolutely interesting. When I am troubled, when you are troubled, where do you go to? It is very easy to give up on God. It is very easy to be angry, to be frustrated, and to be saying, why bother come to Mass? Why bother praying? You don't listen to me. Why bother? And sometimes we can lose our faith. But I love her attitude. She is in total pain, but she still goes to God. And she needs God to be accountable. She says, I want to talk to you. And she goes to God, and in her bitterness, in her pain, in her frustration, she's crying. And as she cries to God, she makes a promise to God. She says, Lord of hosts, be kind to me. Show mercy. Only give me a son. If only you were to give me a son, a male child. And she uses beautiful words. Remember me. Do not forget me. And I said this before. When the Lord remembers, the Lord intervenes. The Lord enters into our lives, into our space. And he says, do not forget me. Now, if we were to analyze and read this from her point of view, she can never say, do not forget me, unless she already feels that she's been forgotten by God. That God seems not to care. And that's why she's able to say, do not do this. Now, there's a question I need to ask. When you and I are praying, are we able to be honest with God? Are we able to tell him that I'm quite disappointed at you? I'm actually upset. How can you let this be? Or we sugarcoat things to God. You know, there's a word that we often use, which I don't think we should be using it. It's overused. It was God's will. A 3-month-old is killed. A 5-month-old is raped, and we say it's God's will. Somebody is in an accident because a drunken driver just crossed the traffic lights, and you say it's God's will. Somebody walks into the house and they mark you and they kill you. We say it's God's will. No, it's not. It's not God's will. And so we are being taught here from the Hebrew, from the Jewish way of prayer. If we want to pray, let us be honest with God. Let us sit with him. Let us ask him, and let us share with him what we feel inside. Now, what she does is she makes a promise. She says, if you give me a child, as long as he lives, this child will never drink any alcohol. No razor shall touch his head. What does that remind you of? Who is the child of a promise whose head has never been shaved, whose mother did not drink? I'll give you a clue. He's known as an Nazarite, and that's Samson. You remember that story? Samson has long hair, and if you go to the word Shemshon, Shemesh, that's the sun. And if you look at the sun and the rays, and it looks like the lion. Who's the Lion of Judah? That's Jesus, the sun God. The Feast of the Light that you and I celebrate on Christmas Day, which we have adopted and we have baptized it into the Christmas, the birth of Christ. Because it was the feast, a pagan feast, where they worship a sun god, and S-U-N-S-O-N, sun changed into Son of God. Does that make sense? So you have Samson's story, which is now intertwined into Samuel's story. And he says, no razor shall touch him, no alcohol shall be on his lips. Who does that in the New Testament? The man with camel clothing, eating locusts, John the Baptist, who came neither drinking nor eating. And you said he was mad. The Son of Man comes drinking and eating. You say he's a drunkard and a glutton. And so you go back to this story. It is a mother who makes a promise on behalf of her son. Let me go to another sensitive story. Have you often heard parents say, I will not baptize my child because my child is young. I will allow them to be old enough to make that decision for themselves. And I often say to myself, do you consult your child what food to eat? Do you consult your child what clothes to wear? Do you consult your child which school to go to? Do you even consult your child which language to use? Is this Zulu or English or French or Italian? No, we don't consult them. We make those decisions on their behalf. Why? Because we know those decisions are important. well, faith is far more greater than any of the decisions that I've made. She makes a promise and she asks God to do this. Verse 12. As she remained long at prayer before the Lord, Eli watched her mouth. For Hannah was praying silently. Though her lips were moving, her voice could not be heard. Eli, thinking that she was drunk, said to her, "How long will you make drunken show of yourself? Sober up from your wine." I want to talk about this a bit. Mea culpa, mea culpa. It's my fault. Is she drunk? Possibly not. She refused to eat. She probably didn't drink anything. Is she in pain? Yes. Is she suffering? Yes. Is she struggling? Yes. She came to the church. Have you seen Catholics who've left the Catholic Church because they had a fight or an argument with a priest? It's not my church. Why? Yes, Eli was out of line. He shouldn't have said what he said. Like all of us, you may be having a bad day, a terrible day. You snap out, snap at someone. And it is that straw that broke the back. And so quite a number of people have left the church. They are hurt by how they were treated. Sometimes they felt that we were insensitive. Maybe sometimes we were insensitive. Maybe we were not with them in the time of a crisis. Maybe they just lost somebody and there was no one to console them. Maybe they had issues in their marriages. Maybe they had issues with their children. A great number of our young people have left. And they continue to leave. And if you ask some of them, they say they don't feel welcomed. They don't feel it's at home. And so we need to go back as a church, as an institution, as a family, as a home, and say, what are we doing? How do I make the person who walks in through those doors feel at home here? How do I ensure that the person who comes to our Mass, by the time they walk away, they are fulfilled, they are fed, they are loved, they are consoled? My dear brothers and sisters, I truly believe that people can come to our Mass and then still walk away still sad. The worst, biggest tragedy is someone who comes to Mass and after Mass goes and commits suicide. Because it means we didn't give them a word of hope, a word of encouragement. And there's something that we sometimes do as a church. We think the church is priest-orientated or it is priest-centered. It's not. It is our church. It is our family. What am I doing to help you feel at home? What is that person doing to help you feel at home? And so it's all of us, what I can do for you, what you can do for the other person. A simple hello, a generous smile, a lingering a little bit. How are you? How was your day? Do you know that, thank you Father Stephen for what you did this evening, you know that we could be here in this session with someone who says, why am I still alive? We could be in this session with someone who says, why bother? We could be in the session with someone who says, I don't see a need. I don't see light at the end of the tunnel. We often ask people, how are you? What is the unexpected answer? I'm fine, thank you. But are we really fine? Are we really okay? And so here Eli misses an opportunity of grace. Where someone comes, and when this person comes, they need grace. The ones used to be a feeling for me, regarding the cathedral. I would go to the cathedral and you will feel that it was a place of prayer. And that was something absolutely beautiful, because a great number of people, Catholics and non-Catholics, Christians and non-Christians, people of different walks of life, will come in and pray and leave. But also there was this beautiful concept about the cathedral. You get the exposition of the Blessed Sacrament throughout the day. And it felt like a home for anyone. And I wish our churches can be like that. I wish people can feel loved, accepted, and forgiven. Let me bring this closer home. My home, your home. Do we make someone else feel loved and accepted? Or am I the first one to hit hard on you? Recently I read something quite interesting. It was a teacher who had written some mathematics formula, 9 times 1, then she said 7, 9 times 2, it's 18, 9 times 3, and the list goes on and on and on. The first one, the answer was 7, which was incorrect, you know that. But all the other ones were correct. And she put this on the board, and all the children were looking at her and they were laughing. And she looks at them, she said, but why are you laughing? And they said to her, you are wrong. Number 1 is wrong. It's not supposed to be like that. And they were laughing and cracking and all those things. And the teacher looks at them and she kept quiet. She was quite matured enough. She kept quiet. And when they had all settled down, and she said, that's the reality of life. Do you know that you will get 9 out of 10 correct, and nobody will notice it, but they will get 1 out of 10 wrong. Everybody will notice it. And they will laugh. And that's life. And I need to go back and say, is that my way of looking into someone else? That I'm looking for the mistakes. That I will do whatever I can to pick the mistake rather than the good you have done. Let's move on, dear friends. If you go to verse 15, Hannah answers, it isn't that, my Lord. I am an unhappy woman. I have had neither wine nor liquor. I was only pouring out my troubles to the Lord. Do not think your handmaid is drunk. My prayer has been prompted by my deep sorrow and misery. In here you find a woman who is in touch with the feelings, with the self, with the emotions, with the struggles. She does not respond to Eli as Eli has acted towards her. She does not respond with hate, but she's able to understand. When you get a chance, please read the book, The Wounded Healer by Henry Nouwen. It's one of the most beautiful books. He's actually one of the best spiritual writers. In this book, Henry Nouwen talks about learning to heal other people from our own wounds, from our own sufferings, from our own pains. And he says we learn from that. And as we learn from that, then we learn to become kind more compassionate, and more loving, and more understanding. Let's go to verse 17. Eli said to Hannah, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked him." She replied, "Think kindly of your maidservant," and left. And she went to her quarters, ate and drank with her husband, and no longer appeared downcast. Early the next morning, they worshipped before the Lord, and then returned to their home in Ramah. When Elkanah had relations with his wife Hannah, the Lord remembered her. She conceived. At the end of her term, she bore a son, whom she called Samuel, since she had asked the Lord for him. She goes to God. She opens up, she pours her heart. She finishes, she goes home. She eats, she drinks, she's married. Is she pregnant yet? No. But she already believes that what she's asked for, the Lord will give it to her. I was once traveling with a friend of mine, and we are going to Swaziland. So at the border gate, we get there, the customs, and we need to fill in some forms. And as we were filling the forms, there was a section in a box. And we were arguing amongst ourselves. What do you write here? I said you must write this, he said you must write that. And we kept on arguing. Eventually we realized that we were both wrong. So we asked the official, and we said, what should we write in here? I think we should write this. He said, no, I think we should write in here. And the officer just looked at us and he said, "Gentlemen, did you not notice the small writing for office use only?" It's quite interesting. And I have a file in my house for God's use only. I don't know what the answer. If it's for office use only, I will not know the answer. If it's for God's use only, I take this and I say, "Lord, sort it out. I don't need to open that file. I'm handing it over to you. Deal with it." And that's the attitude of our prayer. I've prayed about this. When will it happen? I don't know. How will it happen? I don't know. But will it happen? I have faith in God. I spoke about the woman in Mark chapter 5. We had a hemorrhage for 12 years. She waited for 12 years. Recently we read a story in the Gospel of John chapter 5 of a man who'd been bleeding, who's been next to the pool of Bethsaida for 38 years. And so we offer things to God. When will they happen? And us. Will they ever happen? I trust God. And that's what faith is all about. It is not about getting what I want. It is about getting what God knows it's good for me. And that is the crux of the matter. The other point that I also find absolutely interesting. Elkanah had relations with his wife, Hannah. The Lord remembered her. Grace builds on nature. How am I growing in my life? How am I growing in my faith? How am I corresponding with the grace of God to do that which God wants done in my life? The last point that I want to talk about. She conceived and she gave birth to a son. She called him Samuel, which means the Lord has heard. El God, Shama, hear. The Lord has heard. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. So does God listen to our prayers? That's the question. Thank you.